Episode 3, and we are finally getting back to following the books. Sort of. Continuing my series, going through every episode of Shadow and Bone Season 2 and comparing the differences from the book and the TV show. I will be discussing book spoilers for Siege and Storm, Ruin and Rising, and Crooked Kingdom. And with that, let's get into it. So very first thing I want to note is in the first scene, we see Alina looking at the sea whip scales that are like halfway lodged in her arm. Again, this is not something that happened in the book. In my last episode, I discussed this, that they strung the scales of the sea whip together and gave it to Alina. It wasn't something she absorbed into her skin. I honestly thought watching the last episode that it was completely absorbed into her skin the way the stag's antlers were. Obviously, we still see part of them here in her wrist. I also complained about Mel attempting to pull this lever in the previous episode. I guess that was just poor foreshadowing for this scene. But yeah, Sturmhond pulls this lever and then we get a flying ship, which is something Sturmhond has in the books, and Alina is also scared of flying. So basically what happened in this scene pretty much aligns with what happens in the books. Jumping over to the crows, we see Nina attempting to heal Inej. The circumstances are quite different here, but we do have a scene with Nina and Inej, and Inej is injured and Nina is attempting to heal her, even though Nina is not a gifted healer in the Six of Crows book. So I feel like this might be mirroring that scene a little bit. Then we have Kaz having another flashback and lashing out at Wylan. This is parallel to a scene that happens in Crooked Kingdom, but Kaz actually lashes out at Jesper and calls Jesper Geordie, which is Kaz's older brother's name. So this scene is different from what happens in the books, but I see some parallels, and I feel like this is a good representation of what's going on in Kaz's headspace at this point. The next scene in the show is Alina trying to take down the Fold. This is not something she even attempts to do in Siege and Storm, and Alina does not attempt to take down the Fold with only 2 amplifiers.
Although in the book they travel through the Fold and Alina uses her light to protect them from the Volcras.
The next scene with the ship landing, them being confronted by the army, Sturmhond revealing that he's actually Nikolai, Prince of Ravka, and Alina punching him. All of this is basically directly from the book. It's really nice to see this scene portrayed this way because this is a really memorable scene in the book. We then have David showing up where the Darkling is hiding out, which is not something that happens in the book. David meets up with Alina after Alina gets back to East Ravka. David is the one who helped fuse the stag amplifier around Alina's neck, and David does feel guilty for this. He doesn't want to continue helping the Darkling, and him and Alina kind of make up about that. In the show, we also see the Darkling giving David one of Morisova's journals. This is not a book the Darkling has at this point. So in the beginning of the book, Siege and Storm, the Darkling does have Morisova's journal, but when Nikolai and his crew battle the Darkling, they actually steal several of the Darkling's papers, including Morisova's journal, and they give this journal to Alina. So whenever this episode ends, we hear that David has left and he's stolen Morisova's journal. That's probably how the journal gets to Alina in the show, but that's not how it gets to Alina in the books. We then have this scene, which is a show-only scene, where Nikolai confesses to paying the crows to kidnap Alina in season 1, which I just want to know why. What is Nikolai's motivation here? Because it doesn't make sense to me. Nikolai wants Alina in East Ravka presented to the king or to the royal family, right? But in the show, Alina's already in East Ravka being presented to the royal family. So why would Nikolai hire this crew in Ketterdam to bring Alina to Ketterdam so that way Nikolai could take Alina back to East Ravka to present her to the royal family? It just seems so convoluted. I know they're including this in the show because they want a connection between the Six of Crows duology and the Shadow and Bone trilogy, but it just feels sloppy and it doesn't really make sense even in the world that they're creating. Nikolai then brings Alina to the spinning wheel, which is where Alina and the armies gather and train to take on the Darkling. Flipping back to the crow side of things, we have Wylan and Jesper showing up at one of Pekka's mansions under the assumption that it is a glass factory, and then going inside and fixing the piano. I could make parallels to a scene in Six of Crows, but the circumstances are very different, so I'm not sure if they were actually trying to mirror this scene at all or not. In Crooked Kingdom, we have Wylan and Jesper going to an asylum that they were not under the impression it was an asylum whenever they arrived, but they find Wylan's mother there, that she had been committed to this asylum unnecessarily, and Wylan sits down and plays music with his mother. In that particular scene, Wylan plays the flute, although he does also play the piano. He's a decently accomplished musician, so I think this scene kind of mirrors that a little bit, but I'm not sure if they were actually trying to emulate it, that particular scene. Just a little minor gripe, we have Albie saying that he hates piano, but as soon as the piano is fixed, he jumps on and starts banging on it, like he does enjoy playing piano. I'm not really sure why they included this, other than the fact that they wanted Wylan to play piano as well. Then we have this scene between Inej and Kaz, which is basically directly from the book. So many lines in this scene are lines that are pulled directly from the book, and they have the characters saying those same lines. They also have Inej planning to go after the person who attacked her, although the person who attacked her in the books is different. But a lot of the lines that they're talking about, how they're going to go about this, about knowing that person's tells, finding their weaknesses, directly from the book. Kaz then confronts Per Haskell, which is leader of the Dregs, which is one of the gangs in Ketterdam. So this happened a little bit different in the books, although it's very similar to something that happened in Crooked Kingdom. So in the Six of Crows duology, the Crows are part of the Dregs, which is a gang in Ketterdam, and Kaz is actually referred to as Per Haskell's lieutenant. In Crooked Kingdom, this scene happens when Kaz is mad at Per Haskell for teaming up with Pekka Rollins. In the show, it doesn't happen this way, but the outcome is the same, and a lot of the lines in this scene are directly from Crooked Kingdom. We then have Inej killing the man that came after her, which is fairly reminiscent of the person who came after her in Crooked Kingdom, although I'm not sure why they chose to have a completely different person go after Inej. We also have Inej praying after she kills the man, which is something that she does in the books. In the next scene, we have the Darkling cutting Bagra's finger off and trying to turn it into an amplifier. This is something magic users in the past have done. They have played with turning people's bones into amplifiers, particularly people with strong magic like Bagra. Flipping back to Alina, we then have Nikolai proposing to Alina as a way to strengthen the alliance between the royal family of Ravka and the Grisha. This is something that happens in the books. Nikolai continues to be flirty throughout the books, and he is very interested in marrying Alina, not just as a political alliance, but also there is that added benefit. Mel becomes very jealous at this point, and he is very upset that Nikolai is making advances at Alina, and this basically turns into jealous Mel for the rest of Siege and Storm. Alina and Mel have a rocky relationship while Alina's trying to work with Nikolai as they're both leading the armies. Obviously in the show they tone it down a little bit and Mel is less jealous and Nikolai is less insistent on a real marriage and more okay with just a fake engagement. In the next scene we have Genya trying to escape from the Darkling and the Darkling sending his Nichevoya on Genya. In the books, after the fight with the Darkling on the ship, Genya had an opportunity during the fight to stop Alina from leaving, but Genya lets Alina go, and the Darkling punishes Genya for that by sending his Nichevoya on Genya. So this happens under different circumstances, but this does sort of happen in the book. We don't have David around at this point, and it's not while Genya is trying to escape the Darkling, and we're not given any indication in the book that Genya tried to escape the Darkling, although I guess you could say it's plausible because we don't really see from the Darkling's perspective at all, and we don't really know what's going on. Back with the Crows, we have Jesper and Wylan reporting to Kaz what they have found, and Wylan asking Kaz not to go after Albie, the boy that they found in the mansion. We have a line from Wylan here saying that the boy cannot choose who his father is, and that they shouldn't go after the boy just because of his father. This is very in character for Wylan. It's not been mentioned in the show yet, but in the books, Wylan is the son of one of the rich merchants in Ketterdam. Then we go to Matthias, who's in prison, and he's cleaning out the stalls of these animals, and he sees the wolves and he has a moment with them. This is one of those plausible scenes that could have taken place. We're not following Matthias's perspective in the books at this point. The wolves are used for fighting in Hellgate, and the Drusilla do see the wolves as sacred. In the books, we know this because Matthias actually has to fight the wolves. That's obviously something they decided to take out of the show here and not have this fight happen. In the show, Matthias fights another person instead of an animal. I am just going to nitpick and say I really don't like that they had this guy that Matthias is fighting have the word cannibal across his back. We saw this guy earlier in the show and he was being forced to have this branded into his back, so we don't know that he's actually a cannibal. And it just seems really weird that they would put this in here with like no backstory or explanation. I feel like this was just so us as an audience cannot feel sympathy for this other guy who Matthias has to fight, and we're like perfectly fine if Matthias takes him out. That's honestly why I feel like they put that in here, because I really can't think of another explanation. In the Six of Crows book, Nina is at the fight when Matthias fights the wolves. However, she doesn't meet up with Pekka Rollins and does not make a deal with him about letting Matthias out of prison. And in our final scene, we have the Darkling Dream visiting Alina again. This is something that happens in the book, not even always in dreams. Sometimes when Alina's awake, they do have a connection where they can visit each other, but it's even creepier in the books, because at this scene in the books, we have the Darkling visiting Alina while she's sleeping, and Alina wakes up and the Darkling is making out with her. So there you go, even creepier in the books than it was in the show, and the show is definitely creepy enough. Overall, I enjoyed this episode better than the previous episode, and I'm really hoping the show continues in this vein where I can enjoy the show a lot more than I did. The episode 2 was just a little bit off for me, but I'm still really looking forward to the rest of the show. If you want to see more videos like this comparing the book to the show, definitely subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments what your favorite character is in the Grishaverse and if they were featured in these episodes so far. Also, let me know if there's any differences I missed or any other parallels you can draw from what they've shown in the show versus what they have in the books. And I hope to see you in another video.